Chapter 7 Sisters. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Lucy Burgoyne. Sisters by Ada Cambridge. Chapter 7 There was a moon the next night also. It did not appreciably affect him this time. Down in dirty Sandridge, hobnobbing with the baby's caretaker and the general merchant, who, shutting his shop at 6, was free to make the sailor's acquaintance, and help him to spend a pleasant evening. But it turned Redford Garden, with its fine old trees and lawns, into the usual bit of fairyland for those who strayed therein. Redford was packed with Christmas guests. The waggonette that had taken Guthrie Carey to the train had returned full of them, and batches had been arriving at intervals through the day. At bedtime the sisters were sharing rooms. Rose had come to Deb's, Frances to Mary's, and the unmarried men were all at the bachelors' quarters. It was a hot night, and Deb, under the circumstances, was disinclined for sleep. She paid visits to one guest chamber and another, for private gossips and good nights. When she returned to her own, where placid Rose had long composed herself, she roamed the floor like a caged animal. "It is no use my coming to bed yet," she addressed her sister. "I could not sleep. I should only kick about and disturb you. I'll sit down and read a bit." She found a novel and an easy chair, and made deliberate efforts to tranquillize herself. Soon Rose heard sighs and fuss, and sudden rustlings and slappings, and then the bang of a book upon the floor. "I can't read, and the lights bring the mosquitoes. It's too hot in here. I'm going out to get cool, Rosie." "All right," mumbled drowsy Rosie, and the light was extinguished, and the blind of the French window rattled up. Deb flung both leaves wide, like all the Redford doors. They were never locked or barred, and drifting over the veranda, sat down on the edge of it, with her feet on the gravel. She had tossed off her pearl necklace and a breast knot of wilted roses, otherwise she sat in full evening dress, and the night air bathed her bare neck and arms. Also the mosquitoes found them a delicious morsel, so that she had to turn her lacy skirt up over her head to be quite comfortable. From under this hood the dark lamps of her eyes shone forth, gazing steadily into the dim world, into the bit of future that she thought she saw unveiled. The loom of the trees, the glimmer of flowering bushes, the open spaces of lawn and pallid pathways, the translucent blue-green sky, the rising moon, these things made the picture, but were to all intents invisible to their inward sight. She really saw nothing, until suddenly a pin-point spark appeared out of the shadows, moved along a hedge of laurels, and fixed itself in the neighbourhood of a distant garden seat. Then at once she stiffened like a cat that has heard a mouse squeak or a bird's wing rustle. She was alert on instant, concentrated upon the phenomenon. Instinct recognised the tip of a cigar which had the handsome face of Claud Dalzell behind it. "What is he doing out of doors at this time of night?" she wondered, and the little star began to draw her like a magnet. The world becomes another world in these mystic hours. It has new rulers and new laws, or rather, it has none. The moon sways more than ocean tides. In broad day Deb would no more have stalked a man than she would a crocodile. In this soft, free, empty, irresponsible night the primal woman was out of her husk, one with the desert prowling animal that calls through the moonlight silence for its mate. 20 times had she snubbed an ardent lover at the behest of all sorts of reasons, and so-called instincts cultivated for her guidance by generations of wise men. Now, all in a moment, came this moon-born impulse to give herself to him unmasked. She could not resist it. Like Deb, Claud had not been inclined to sleep, and for much the same reason, the guest chamber usually allotted to him being needed for a lady. He had been sent to the bachelors' quarters, a barrack-like dormitory amongst the outbuildings, very useful for the accommodation of the occasional vet or cattle buyer, and to take the overflow of company on festive occasions. Jim Urquhart, when at Redford, always slept there. He preferred it, particularly when he had companions with whom to smoke and talk sheep, and perhaps play cards at liberty, for the bachelors' quarters had its own wood stack and supplies, and one could sit by a blazing hearth all night, if so disposed, without incommoding anybody. Generally 4 bachelor beds were made up, and a screened end of the room stacked with the material for twice as many more. At Christmas all were in use, and lined the 2 long walls, which Dalzell called herding, and disliked extremely, while recognising that it was a necessary arrangement to which it was his duty to conform. The herd was undressing itself in a miscellaneous manner, yawning, chaffing, cutting stupid jokes, some of them at his expense, until the process was at an end, and he could reasonably assume the fellows to be asleep. He preferred the gardens to the bachelors' quarters. And the free night enfolded him, the rising moon uplifted him, in the usual way, he being, like Deb, like Guthrie Carey, an instrument fitted to respond to their mute appeals. Perhaps even more finely fitted than Guthrie or Deb, for he had what are called gifts of intellect and imagination transcending theirs, faculties of mind which, lacking worthy use, bred him in a sort of chronic melancholy, the poetic discontent of the unappreciated and misunderstood, a mood to which moonlight ministers as wine to the drinking fever, at once an exquisite exasperation and a divine appeasement. He was a poet, a painter, a musician, possibly a soldier, or a king, possibly anything, spoiled, blighted by that misnamed good fortune which the lucky workers who had to work so naturally and stupidly envied him. The proper stimulus to the worthy development of the manhood latent in him had been taken from him at the start, and now he wandered among his dilettantisms, dissatisfied and ineffectual. He lived beneath himself in his common intercourse with others. He ate his heart when he was alone. Unconsciously, by force of habit, he selected the most comfortable and cleanly of the garden seats, and made sure that the best of cigars was drawing perfectly, before he gave himself to his meditations on this particular moonlight night. Then he began to think of Deb, in the same new way that Carey had begun to think of her after discovering a dangerous rival in the field. To Claud, Guthrie was dangerous in his rude bulk and strength, the knitted brute power that the sea and his hard life had given him. To Guthrie, Claud was dangerous in the high-bred beauty and finish of his person, clothes and manners, and in the astounding cleverness that he displayed. Each man feared the force of those qualities which he lacked himself, and was secretly ashamed of lacking. Claud Dalzell considered this matter of the rival, not a probable but a possible rival, seriously, for the first time. Hitherto he had had an easy mind in his relations with the beauty of the countryside. She was his for all he wanted of her, and feeling this, he had taken no steps to register his claim. He had not even yet proposed to her.